Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Optimizing Mother podcast. I am so excited to have, as a guest today, Mrs. Devori Nussbaum. Hi, Devori. Welcome.
Hi.
So, Devori actually has her own podcast. Devori's podcast is called Chassidus Through the Eyes of a Psychotherapist. Her accent is lovely, all the way from England, and she discusses the intersection between spirituality and psychology, and she really breaks down terms and how we can do our avodah in a very real, down-to-earth way. And she explains how our entire inner world, our emotions, our perceptions of ourselves, our traumas, they're all interconnected. And ultimately, our goal is to be able to do our avodah properly. And Devori so beautifully helps us take the Hasidic terminology and ideas and break it down. Her approach really is to address challenges through the mind, through body, through breathing. And she has such a wide depth and knowledge of human psychology, relationships, and she really helps a lot of people. And I'm hoping that today she can help all the mothers that are listening to this podcast, whether you are a Beis Rivka mother or any mother that's listening to this. And the truth is, the information that Devori shares is actually helpful to people who are not mothers as well. So I'm really excited to be having you on this podcast. And Devori, you ready to dive in?
Yeah, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction.
Okay. So, parenting, which is like a pretty modern term for us as Beis Rivka mothers, is not just, the act of raising children and getting them to brush their teeth and just be like, adults that can take care and fend for themselves. Our role as mothers is really raising children, literally, to raise them, to be mechanech them. And I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is unique about our role as mothers, that's unique to us as Yidden and as Hasidim, that's different from just parenting, quote unquote?
I think a lot of the opportunity of parenting, according to what we understand from a Torah perspective, is really guiding and educating and teaching, giving over wisdom to our children. And there is something that is very different than controlling and giving over wisdom and guiding. And in order to be able to be a guide and give over wisdom, there needs to be a connection. There needs to be a connection between the person who is giving and the person who's receiving. And so a lot of our process is to create that connection and then to guide and give over the wisdom that we have about our perspective of reality, our boundaries of reality, our the value systems that we have, and the beauty and of the beautiful perspectives that we have of living a life that's meaningful and purposeful, in general, like how to live and how to navigate circumstances that are tricky and difficult in our lives, and also wonderful, all of it.
Right. So let's break that down a little bit. As Yidden, we know that it's a partnership. There's the mother, there's the father, and there's Hashem. So where does Hashem come into the relationship with parenting and being a guide?
So there is this, well, God is our parent too, right? How does God guide us? He gave us the Torah. Torah is God's wisdom. It's like the placenta, actually. It's that space between mother and child where the information is channeled, right? The placenta is what enables the baby to receive nurture from the mother. The Torah is like that placenta that enables us to receive nourishment from the source of all life. It breaks it down for us. And in fact, it says that a baby learns the entire Torah inside of the mother's womb. And when it comes out, it forgets it all. And also we're separated from our placenta, right? So you see right there that there is this experience of, the life force within everything, the oneness and unity of all of creation. We're a part of this oneness. And then we're born into a world of separateness. But we're not born without a guidebook. We're first taught it, and it's given to us as an imprint in our psyche. Then it's taken away from us in order for us to then learn it through the human experience. And in fact, this is the process of teaching our children is also reflective in the process of teaching our inner children, right? So teaching our outer children, teaching our inner children, but it's so central to what it means to be a Jew. It's written in the Shema, right? Of all the things that can possibly be written in this beautiful prayer that we are supposed to say twice a day, that has so much depth and meaning to it that I feel is so misunderstood. But we can talk about that like a whole nother conversation about what Shema is. But just bringing this one thing of this and teach it to your children. There is something about the oneness of God, the unity of God, the beauty of life, and the possibilities that are available to us that we don't necessarily automatically just have. Because when we're born into the world, we're born into a state of defensiveness. We're born into a state of survival. We're born into a state of, I now do not see the oneness and unity of everything. I see only the lens of separateness. And I am like it's the survival of the fittest. Like that's how we come in. I have to eat, I have to sleep, I have to survive, I have to adapt to survive now. I have to, and then my animal soul kicks in, my defense mechanisms kick in, and my animal soul personality kicks in. And then somehow I have this process of trying, I go through this process of learning and having to teach my animal soul to also know God. And teach my children, my inner children, how to connect to God. And how do I do it? I need a mother. I need a mother. I'm talking about energetic mother. What is the energetic mother that can help me to learn how to teach, how to guide my inner children? It's the Torah. It's really that the wisdom, and that can hold us and that can guide us. And if it is taught in a way that is really nurturing and guiding, right? So a lot of times, obviously, everything can be taken into the side of control, the side of klipa, and side of stuckness. But this is, I believe, the authentic, essence of what this was always meant to be. And when we have pain around it, obviously everything can be distorted. But this is the hand that we're being given as an opportunity to connect.
So beautiful, like Tyra Simecha, like it's like a mother. So I think that we would all love to ideally do everything in such a nurturing, loving, mothering way. I'd love to use a buzzword, and if you could explain to us a little bit of what this buzzword is, and also how we can overcome this buzzword. People talk a lot about being dysregulated in our parenting. Can you explain what that term means, dysregulated, and how we can, I guess, regulate ourselves so that we could be teaching from such a beautiful perspective?
Right. So dysregulated is basically a state in my nervous system where I feel fear. And when I feel fear, my body, literally my physical biology, goes into a state of defense. And what happens is that from a biological level, my certain organs will shut down, certain organs will overcompensate. My muscles will constrict and contract. My breath will become shorter and more shallow. My vision will change. The way I perceive through my senses will change. There's so many things about my biology that's going to change. And one of the main things that happens in my biology as well is that my brain function changes. It means that my prefrontal cortex, which is the Chabad part of my brain, my ability to get curious, to think logically, to be self-aware and focused, the Chachma bin and Das of my brain actually shuts down, and what takes over is an impulsive, reactive, amygdala-based thought process, which is stories and narratives about reality that play themselves over and over, like predicting the future, or making blanket statements of terror, like I'm worthless, or this child is a failure, or if this thing happens, crazy things are going to happen. He doesn't even finish the sentence. It's just And what these thoughts do is they create a sense of, or worst case scenarios will start flashing before your eyes. It's a little bit like the Jewish people at Har Sinai, when it says, the Sultan showed us the vision of, Moshe's coffin, What is this? This is a vision of worst case scenarios flashing through our eyes. We all have it internally. When we're at the point of transition in our life, when we're at the, anything that's a beautiful opportunity awaiting us, our defense mechanism goes into unknown equals scary. Unknown equals I don't have control. It equals vulnerable. It equals this is an opportunity to trust. And also, because my defense mechanism or my animal soul goes into terror, it says, no, shut it down, control it, worst case scenario it, and then you end up acting from reactivity rather than logic.
Right. This could happen anytime your kid does anything and you're like, oh my gosh, worst case scenario, they're going to end up being, I don't know what. And so I better nip it in the bud right now as tough as I could, because who knows what's going to happen if I don't.
Exactly. Right. So I'm already 20 years of flashing before my eyes, and I'm acting as if this child just got arrested. But really they just spilled water on the floor. like disproportionate reactions are a result of this kind of reaction. Instead of thinking, well, what is the opportunity for me to educate my child in this moment? Let's say my child does spill water on the floor. The opportunity is for me to teach them that when you spill water, we clean it up, right? This is a beautiful thing, and I can bring my child to town and say, when we spill water, we clean it up. But if I'm terrified of what this might mean about my child, because I have stories and belief systems that are playing in my head, like records that are not necessarily true or based in reality. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to feel fear, and I'm going to start yelling, or I'm going to have a reaction. And then my child is going to have a reaction in response, and there's no education that just happened here. There's just a power struggle, right? So instead of there being an education, there is who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. So, the kid will feel shame because they're bad, because otherwise their mother wouldn't be reacting this way, let's say. Or if they're an older kid, they might get angry with the mother, like, why are you making such a big deal? I just spilled water on the floor, and it becomes like this, And then there's no opportunity for education. Education comes when there's connection. Connection and influence come together. When there's connection, there's influence.
So how would I, if I do get dysregulated, whether it's because messes actually get me nervous and that water on the floor means that I'm going to have to work out and clean it, or take the effort that it takes to get the kid to clean it. If I do find myself getting dysregulated over small things, over big things, over them fighting, over them, day-to-day stuff, how could I bring myself back to a place of regulated so that education could happen?
So first of all, I would say every mother's this is the reality of our lives. Like this is exactly where God placed us. This is exactly where we're meant to be. He put us in this position of having to parent, like when we are still babies ourselves, right? And it's not a mistake. I don't believe this is a mistake. This isn't a problem, and it's so important for us not to judge ourselves because of the scenarios we find ourselves in, and to start getting curious. As soon as we judge ourselves, what happens is there's a heaviness that comes with that, and a stuckness that comes with that. And I would say that any kind of heaviness and stuckness is really the side of klipa. It's disconnecting me from my authentic opportunities for connection and growth. And so the process is, first of all, to acknowledge that I'm a work in progress, and it's going to take me as long as my child is being raised to grow as a human being, and I'm going to be dysregulated, and slowly through my process I'm going to grow. And what I'm going to educate my child is that life is about growth. Life is not about perfection. Life is not about not making mistakes. Life is about growth, and I'm going to model that growth for my child by growing myself. Right, this is number one. We have to acknowledge that to ourselves. We're all works in progress, and we're all on a journey of growth. And if I step out thinking that I'm not going to be ever dysregulated as a mother, and I'm going to do things better than anyone, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. I remember thinking that, I was definitely not going to make the same mistakes that my mother made, and I'm in a position where I'm like, my mother was so amazing. I wish I could be even half as great as her, the fact that she was able to hold certain boundaries in ways that I'm like, wow, how did she do that? I struggle with that, or different things, and you start realizing really parenting is the most unbelievably challenging and also blessed experience a person can go through. And it also goes for parenting my own inner children as well, right? Transforming my own inner experience of life. So the first thing I need to do is recognize that I'm going on a journey, and it's not about getting it right, and it's not about not making mistakes. It's about growing through my experience. And the way I grow through my experiences, I stay curious and soft around my experiences, rather than judging myself and shaming myself and hiding behind all the judgments that I might make about myself. And the way I can start doing that is, first of all, just become aware of the judgments that I'm making and get curious about them. It's interesting, I'm making that judgment on myself. I wonder where that comes from. And there's a lot of self-awareness exercises that a person can do, and a lot of getting curious is a massive part of this. And noticing and seeing where this takes you. I mean, we could look at what this process could look like in more detail, but the way that I would say, the starting point, the entryway, is the curiosity about the judgments I'm making on myself, the judgments I'm making on my child, the judgments I'm making on the situation. Where do they come from? Are they true? And even if I don't even know that, just to get curious with, that's an interesting perspective. That's one perspective. And where am I making worst case scenarios? And is it, what other possibilities are there? What other options are available here? And that already opens my mind.
You mentioned, though, a lot of physical, biological changes that happen. How would you center yourself or regulate yourself around that?
So I would say that, it's really a process of training. I think when we start having dysregulated reactions, it takes a while for us to recognize that actually what I'm embarking on learning is how to run a marathon. Just because someone tells me that you're going to run a marathon by running every day for like 5 minutes longer, it doesn't mean you actually know how to run a marathon. You have to actually do the training to get there. And learning how to regulate our own nervous systems is a training process. And the training process it takes time. And it's not something that happens overnight, and it's something that we need to have a lot of patience and compassion and softness with ourselves around. And it starts by recognizing and becoming aware of the constriction that I'm holding in my body, learning how to release it from my body, learning how to get curious and catching myself quicker and quicker, learning how to breathe differently, learning how to move differently. And there's many regulation exercises and techniques. I talk about quite a few of them on my podcast. And there are many, nowadays I think people are quite aware of what some of those might be. Like, I might have to have some kind of regime that I do. It's like almost like dental hygiene, I might have to like nervous system hygiene. Like, I need to know these are the things that I need to put in place in order to set myself up for success. So a good night's sleep, eating. As a parent, I need to be self-aware of what are my baseline needs. Going to the gym every day or a couple times a week to like just let go of all of that like pent up energy. And everyone will be different. Some people that it's spending time painting every day what helps me come back into myself. And all of these things set me up for success. Of course, when I am in a situation where I get triggered, I still might get triggered into that state because of a belief system that's very, very deep. But this is called setting myself up for success. That's number one. Recognizing that, of course, it's going to be harder for me to regulate my nervous system if I'm running on no sleep, or I haven't eaten yet, or whatever my body needs, the fuel hasn't come in. Once I know I've set myself up for success and I'm still getting triggered by certain things, I start noticing the patterns. Are there the same familiar things that keep showing up? And then I have to do some introspective work in between. So maybe like 2 or 3 times, the same thing happens. The kid spills their water on the floor and I lose it. I need to stop and say, hold on a second, I'm watching this as a pattern. What is it about my kid spilling water on the floor that feels so terrifying for me? And then I have to give myself the time to get curious about it and say, what do I believe it means about me or about my child if they spill water on the floor? And it could be, let's say, I had an experience of where I was around someone who would spill water on the floor, but they actually had a condition where their muscles weren't strong, and eventually that was how their parents found out about their muscles not being strong, and eventually that led to a more severe illness. So every time I see my child spilling water on the floor, I have flashbacks of like, oh no, is my child sick? And that puts me in a state of like real fear, and then I flip into like, we can't do this, right? This is just, I've made up this example on top of my head, but like something like that could be that there must be a story around it, right? If I'm having a disproportionate reaction to something, it's not usually about the thing that's happening right now. It's more to do with something that's already been programmed there. Exactly. And so once I acknowledge what it is, I can then get curious around it. Like, is it true? And what's the difference between that story or that scenario and this one? And really sifting in, giving my mind an awareness of that was then, this is now. And there are many processes that would be done in a therapy session, let's say, or through trauma therapy or different types of therapy to help to disentangle myself from that belief system and start to integrate a new belief system. And it all starts with curiosity, and it starts with also imagining how it is I do want to react to that child. Noticing and visualizing myself acting that way, and noticing if there's any resistance in my body, if there's any parts of my body that feel constricted, breathing air into those parts of my body, and allowing them to release or whatever it might be. And every situation would be different, so it's, there are like so many different ways of working with this, but this is just like one example of what it might look like. And then noticing how it shifts differently next time, noticing when the child does spill the water next time, how it sits differently, and if I'm still being dysregulated, I can go through that process again, and so on, until I start feeling lighter around the experience, and I can start actually shifting triggers like that, especially the ones that I see happen very often.
You just mentioned, Devori, like going through the therapeutic model of trying to figure out why you're so triggered. Where does Tanya come in? Like, where does everything that the Alter Rebbe says about Moach Shalit Al Halev and getting in touch with our Nefesh L'Kis, like, where does the Nefesh Bahamas Nefesh L'Kis, which is how we started the conversation, like, Where does that come in?
Okay, so the Moach, what is Moach? Moach is Chabad, right? Chachma, Bina, and Das. And that is prefrontal cortex function, okay? So Chachma is the capacity to get curious and to go beyond stories. So Chachma is before Bina. Bina is already where you have something to analyze. Chachma is an open state of curious wonder where we're in a flow state, where there is no self-consciousness at all, and which we call the state of bittul, or a state of where I'm able to experience Ein Sof, or ayin, this infinite possibility, the state of saying koyach ma, the power to say, what is this? What's going on? Interesting perspective. What else is there? Right? A real open state of curiosity where we are open to insight and awareness coming to us. We say that that's where the point of awareness can come to us, when we're in that open state of mind. So my capacity to get curious and open-mindedness is what takes me out of a stuck state of defense, which is my animal soul, by the way. My animal soul consciousness is my animal soul is focused on protection and survival, and therefore it creates its own narratives and stories about how to keep me safe and small and in control, or its own perception of in control, but doesn't have God in the picture. Whereas the divine soul is surrender, because I don't have control, but God does, and God is great, and I'm being guided by the energy that has created the entire universe, and that is goodness, and is taking me on a journey of growth. Whereas my animal soul says, doesn't mention God at all, and it's just like, okay, this is happening, that's a problem, we need to shut this down, we need to fix this, right? It's really focused on my survival, very much so. And it's not thinking logically. There's no logic behind it most of the time. It's just narratives and stories that I've picked up from my very early childhood, based on assumptions that I created, because nobody was really guiding me and teaching me through the difficult situations I went through in my life, and I made up reasons why things happened the way that they did. So bringing me back into Chabad, I start with the curiosity of like, okay, interesting judgment, interesting perspective. I'm already bringing online my Chabad, my Moach, right? Then Bina is my logical capacity to understand, like, oh, is this judgment that I'm making true? Not true? Where does it come from? What's going on? Like the processing of which someone might do in therapy, really understanding where does this come from, what's the narrative, and so on. And then my das is my capacity to focus my attention on a new, my bina would also be where I think about how do I want to perceive this from now on? What is my value system according to Torah, according to how I want to show up now in my life with my child in the future? And then my das is focusing my attention on what I would feel like if I really did believe these belief systems that I want to integrate, the Torah belief systems. How might I feel if I really felt guided and connected to God, and I really felt trusting that God was also guiding my child, and that, if I really believed my belief system, if I really, how would I feel in my body somatically if I really trusted in God and God's capacity to redeem and transform and create the most beautiful life for all of my children, whatever that looks like, right? The trust, the absolute bitachon and trust in the goodness of God. So, like the Chachgut Ben Zaingut thing. Now, this whole idea of the Moach Shalit Al Halev is that you have to have a moach, like your prefrontal cortex needs to be online to have choice over what's going on in your heart. If you are not regulated, your heart rules you. And in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says a person in the state of Russia is ruled by their heart. They're ruled by their impulse. They're called dead, as it were, because their consciousness is offline. They're impulsively reacting to life, and they don't have bechira. The whole concept of a Beinoni is someone who has bechira over their conscious thought, speech, and action. They are not reactive at all in any kind of way. They are absolutely regulated. And we can have a Beinoni moment. A Beinoni moment is where my Chabad is online, and also the Alter Rebbe says a Beinoni is able to notice both sides. I can notice the reactive voices of my animal soul saying, This is dangerous, and I can also notice the trust inside of my heart that says, actually, I really believe that this is a journey that we have to go through, and it's okay, and I can guide my child now without reacting, and I have the capacity to choose to do that over that, and hold compassion for the animal soul consciousness that doesn't see and know God yet, right? And this is work to be able to do that. I have to learn how to come into my prefrontal cortex. And I have to learn how to then educate my animal soul consciousness. And this is really what I would say, this is what in my practice as a therapist, I would say this is what the process of therapy is all about. But of course there are many types of therapists who do therapy in many types of ways, right? So I'm not talking on behalf of everyone. But this is what I see the work as. This is very powerful, life-changing work, and it's absolutely what the Alter Rebbe is explaining in Tanya is our spiritual service and why we came to the world.
So really, being dysregulated means you're overtaken by the Nefesh Bahamas, and the goal is to bring you back to the Nefesh Elikis and to your Neshama.
To a state of choice, yes. To a state of
choice, so that so that you can choose, though, the perspective of the Nefesh Lekis, which is Hashem and Torah.
Yes.
So how do we help our children get out of the state of survival and Nefesh Bahamas and into a state where they can choose the Nefesh Lekis?
By modeling that for them. We become the mother, right? This is by modeling it for them, by doing the work ourselves. And the more regulated we become, the more we exude like a regulated energy, and our energy field impacts all the people around us, including our children. They are impacted like by Wi-Fi from our nervous systems. Nervous systems are tuned to each other. You know, like when a baby is born, we often say, like we do say, like in hospitals, like put the baby on the mother's skin, because the baby learns how to regulate its temperature and its heartbeat by connecting with the mother's temperature and heartbeat by being on her skin. The other thing that the baby regulates with is the mother's nervous system state. So if the mother is in a state of terror, the baby will attune to that and mirror the state of terror. And if the mother is in a state of peace internally and real presence, which is an adult state versus a child state, then the baby feels held and safe, right? And it can relax and it can grow. And so the more we are able to...
That is so cool. So you're saying the more I'm in touch with my ability to choose my Nefesh Lekis, that in and by itself, without saying a word, is what actually helps my child get in touch with his Nefesh Lekis.
1,000%. Absolutely. And then when I'm in that state, I'm also able to educate. Education means like teaching rather than commanding and controlling and ordering and shutting down, and right. So like I can really sit down with my child, and like if let's say my child is, let's say, struggling with benching, and I'm like, okay, you just have to bench because that's what we do after we eat. And then I can get really frustrated and annoyed and dysregulated around it and have a whole power struggle with my child. Or I can sit down and say to them, I understand that you're struggling with benching. Have we ever read the benching in English? Do you know what we're actually saying here? And the child, depending on the age of the child, but child might say, actually, no. And you can say, well, are you interested? And like, just maybe we could read the first paragraph together, because I think if you understand what you're saying, it might be easy for you to know. I understand. I would never want to just say words I don't understand. I get you. Like I'm connecting with you. I understand your struggle. Let me show you. Let me teach you. And the child may or may not be open to it, but there's a bigger chance the child will be open to it if they have a good connection with the child. If the child feels safe around me, if the child feels loved and connected to me, which is they feel my presence, and the child may be very open to actually hearing what I have to say and reading the English, and that might inspire the child. And that's actually called education. Like you've taught your child something, right? You've taught them something. And that's very different. And sometimes we have to think and focus, especially when it comes to chinuch, on the the saying, like, lose the war to win the battle. We have to think about the long term. Like, what is...
Wait, lose the war to win the battle. Is it the opposite? Lose a battle to win a war?
Yeah. I don't know which way or which one is whatever, okay. But one of them, okay. Sometimes we have to lose the battle to win the war, which means sometimes we have to just recognize, like, in this moment, if I power struggle with my child, the relationship is going to suffer, which means that I'm going to have less of an impact next time, and that it might be better for the long-term education of my child to just let it go and find them in a time when they're more regulated and I'm more regulated, and we can have a conversation about what happened just then and think about how we want to move forward, rather than power struggling and controlling them in the now. That's going to create more long-term resentment and more disconnect between us. So really focusing on attachment as a core principle in chinuch, right, as a core principle, and recognizing my own internal states, and also acknowledging to my children sometimes and explaining to them what it means to be dysregulated, and how sometimes I do get dysregulated because I lose myself, like my inner children take over and I feel fear, and I need to then take time to go and breathe or take a walk and whatever it is and come back and let them know it's not about you, it's about my own learning how to train my own energy. Right? And you're modeling that for them. You're modeling growth for them like that. You're modeling what it means to take responsibility for your own emotional states. And this is how you're helping to teach your child what it means to get more choice over conscious thought, speech, and action, which is ultimately what the entire Tanya is about. Can you control your thought, speech, and action? And the only way you can do that is by really learning how to master your own energy. Really learning how to connect with and influence your emotions. If you try and shut them down and they're bad, they're wrong, they hijack you. It's like they literally just, like, every time I shame myself for, let's say, feeling fear, then I'm gonna be putting up internal scaffolding to stop myself from ever feeling fear, which means I'm going to actually be trying to control my environment and the people around me on a much deeper level than I even am aware of. And it's going to be outside of my awareness because I actually have so many judgments on what it means to have fear in the first place, or just as an example, right? So the more I'm able
how do you
to
instead influence the fear instead?
So first of all, you acknowledge it and you understand that, of course, it makes so much sense that you feel afraid because you don't know God yet. My animal soul does not know God, and just like we have a mitzvah not to be cruel to animals, right? That we have to be kind to our inner animal, right? And also,
is that your interpretation, or you heard that somewhere?
It's my interpretation of this particular mitzvah, but it also says in the end of chapter 32 of Tanya that when you see someone acting like an animal, like a creature, the only way that you can influence them is through love, right? It says that in chapter 32 of Tanya, right?
Yeah.
And again, when you notice yourself acting like a creature, right? Everything can be, like Hasidus teaches us, everything needs to be turned inward. To the only way I can influence myself is through love and compassion. Compassion, he said, this Alter Rebbe says compassion, because you can't always love someone when they're acting in a certain way. But you can always have compassion. And that compassion opens up the door for influence, for perhaps that will be the ropes that will draw them in. Perhaps that will be what will influence them to come around. And we know that when you have connection with connection, you're bringing something back into the whole. You're taking it out of fragmentation, which is really Ra. I think Rabbi Wyro Jacobson talks about the word Ra, meaning shaky or fragmented, in some of his talks, this idea where it originally comes from. And we have a lot of consciousness around bad, evil, a lot of judgment around this word, but really it just means a state, part of us that's in a fragmented state, there's parts that are not communicating with each other. The energy is stuck. And so bringing it back into the wholeness is really what redeems it. It's brings it back into the wholeness of who we are. And this is our work in the world, to elevate the sparks, right? To bring parts of ourselves,
to bring Hashem,
exactly, back into conscious awareness. When we become aware of something, we shed light on it. We bring it into the light, just the awareness, and then to bring God consciousness that is the part of.
Can
the
you
process.
share a little bit about your story and how you came to doing this work, how you came to, doing this? It's so integrated, this idea of healing, or this idea of overcoming animal soul stuff in order to get in touch with our Neshama stuff, and getting in touch with it's really one and the same, like the Rebbe says, the soul of a Jew, the psyche of a Jew, it's one and the same.
Sure.
How did you get into this? What is some of your earlier life experiences, and how did that inform your work?
So I would say the things I went through quite a few different I can't really even put a label on them, because at the moment the way I perceive them is that they were teaching experiences for me. But if somebody else would look at them objectively, they might say oh my gosh, that sounds really intense and really traumatic, or whatever you want to call it, right? At the time it did create trauma. And when I say trauma, I mean trauma is a state in the brain where there's it's too overwhelming emotionally to process, so you split off from it. So it created a sense of disassociation or disconnection from parts of myself. And then the healing of that is to bring those parts back together. So that's my definition of how I would call something, whether it was traumatic, if there was a splitting that went on in the consciousness. So I did have a lot of splitting.
Splitting from Hashem? Splitting from what?
Splitting from parts of myself, and splitting from Hashem, and splitting from other people. The relationships that I had were very I couldn't really connect with other people. I had an eating disorder, and I also had a lot of shame of existence. I think I inherited a lot of stuff, but I also had a lot of experiences socially that were quite traumatic. Obviously bullying and different things like that I went through in my earlier years. A lack of understanding and awareness at the time was not there, and so my consciousness was very, I would say, in a state of fragmentation as a teenager, and I ended up with an eating disorder that really consumed all of my headspace. I would say 99.9% of the things I thought about all day long was what I ate, how much I ate, what I was going to eat next, and I had a lot of OCD around different rituals that I needed to do to keep myself a certain weight, and the exercises I needed to do, and I was constantly counting and recounting stuff, and this was basically my headspace, and I didn't have space for relationships, for people, for anything. I was really not, I would say, a present, connected human being at all. And I was in a lot of pain all the time. I really just wanted to die all the time. And And I also wanted to help myself because I actually didn't have any safe adults in my life, that anyone I could reach out to help for. And so I really trusted and believed that the only person who was going to help me was me. And so I just used to read a lot of self-help books, and I tried to figure it out myself. It was just a very, very solo, lonely journey. And I eventually did. A lot of things, like trial and error, a ton of it. But I eventually did come to some kind of awareness. I learned from some books how to start thinking or talking to myself with a bit more compassion, and started to feel. So I think there was about 4 years where I was constantly trying to judge and bully myself into change. So I had a lot of. I grew up in a Hasidic environment, and I went to Hasidic schools, and I had a lot of like, you have to make yourself change. A lot of like. This harshness and of like I used to think of this like Pirkei Avos, like where it says the more flesh the more worms, and like different phrases that I learned about, like the eating without having the awareness of Hashem is like eating like a barrel of filth, and I don't know, there were these phrases that I had picked up from a Hasidic, and these ideas are written, but I think that I interpreted them through the lens of defense. And I interpreted them to mean that I must be really bad and really disgusting, right? So I was looking at them through, how do I keep myself safe around this, rather than understanding the idea from a higher consciousness, right? So I was very dysregulated in this sense, and I was feeling, and I would use a lot of threats. I would name call. I would say, you're disgusting, you're this, and I would talk to myself this way, and I would write notes to myself about what a disgusting human being I was, in hope that that would help me change. Right? It was all in hope that that was going to make me change once and for all. If I punish myself enough, then I will become a better person, because I'm really a terrible person. And then at the age of 18, I read a book that was for the first time in my life giving me the concept of, what if you communicated to yourself with compassion? What if you made space for your experience, and instead of yelling at yourself and beating yourself up, you gave yourself permission to explore and get curious about what was really going on? And it literally shifted. It opened up doors for me. I was stuck for 4 years, and I was in cycles of binge eating and purging, and binge eating and purging, and binge eating and purging, and starving myself, and exercise, obsessive. Like, I could not get addiction and OCD. I could not get out of the cycle, not for 1 second to breathe. And then I had this moment of actually asking myself some curious questions and getting, what's actually going on for me? What am I actually feeling? What are the parts of myself that are struggling right now? And it was like, I could breathe, I could think, I could choose for the first time. I had an opportunity where I could go back into one of those cycles, and I had the capacity to say, actually, I'm going to choose to do something differently for the first time in my life. And I was like, oh, this clearly does not work, right? This clearly does not work. There must be something to it. And it took a long time for me to really integrate and really get around what this was. And a lot of it had to do with understanding the food I was eating and how I was eating, and my relationship with food taught me a lot about my relationship with life and with God and with people as well. And after that, I ended up getting married, and I was married for a short amount of time, for 3.5 years. And then I got divorced, and it was a very emotionally, psychologically unhealthy marriage. And I was also had no clue what a healthy relationship looked like, not a clue. So of course, I was blaming myself for being the bad person here a lot, how to work with or even recognize. So once I did get divorced at the age of 23 years old, I was stuck with like this sense of, wow, I'm so clueless. Like, how could I go through life not knowing what emotional health looks like? What does it mean to be emotionally healthy? What does it actually mean? What does good emotional health look like? Like, I know what good physical health looks like, but how do I not know what good emotional health looks like? Right? And I was just so kind of shocked by that no one had ever taught me, or I hadn't even known. I was like, I'm going to go figure this one out. Like, I have to go figure this one out. And of course sorry
to interrupt you. I just want to clarify. When you say good emotional health, do you mean like parallel? Do you mean that's the same as good spiritual health, or as separate from spiritual health?
I believe it's exactly the same thing. Right?
Okay,
Taking responsibility for who, right. So guilt tripping, for example, is not emotionally healthy. Taking responsibility for my own participation in certain dysfunctional things is emotionally healthy, right? And so I'm saying, like, again, according to Chassidus, taking responsibility for my own thought, speech, and action is my responsibility. Trying to control and manipulate other people is not going to get me anywhere, and also it's not my responsibility, and also it's judging other people. And there's a whole chapter in Tanya that talks about not judging other people, right? Unless you stand in their shoes and treating them with love and kindness. And what even does that mean, to have love for another person and not judge them and not blame them? And so I didn't know what it meant, where the boundaries lay in existence. I did not know what was my responsibility, what was not, what I did have choice over, what I didn't have choice over. I was taking responsibility for how other people were feeling. How if other people were annoyed and upset with me, I was bad. Like these kind of merging, which is a lot of the cause of anxiety and codependency and dysregulation, can come from really taking responsibility for other people's perspectives on us, rather than thinking, am I doing what's right in the eyes of God and in the eyes of others, as far as my responsibility to them. Not like, because for example, I can do what's right and someone else might not like it, but am I going, right? For example, I could have some private information, someone could say, tell me it, and I could say, no, it's not respectful of me to give you over that information in the eyes of God and in the eyes of what I believe is right according to my value system, and you could be really angry with me. But if I know that this is my boundaries and this is where I lie, then I'm going to be okay. I have to learn how to breathe through the fact that I might have pain over the fact that you're angry with me, but still, it's not emotionally healthy for me to go and tell you the information so that you can be pleased with me. I'm not responsible for that. It's it's your stuff, So I have to know.
So how do we teach this, though? I'm listening to what you're saying, and it makes so much sense, but how do we teach these Hasidic concepts and what the Alter Rebbe is saying in a way that's understandable, palatable, relevant to the next generation?
So first of all, this is my passion. This is what I do. I mean, at the moment, I've been trying to... I teach 6 classes a week on this subject, where we go through Tanya and we look at it through the lens of psychology. And when I have the time, when I have the capacity, I edit some of those classes and upload them to my podcast. But they are so few compared to the amount of classes I'm actually teaching. And I've written a book on the subject, which is in the process of being published. Please God, it will be published in a year from now. And it is going to be available. But at the moment, it is...
What's it going to be called?
So between me and the publisher, we're still debating the topic and the title. But I want it to be called "To Live with an Open Heart," Tanya through the eyes of a psychotherapist, as a subtitle. But we'll see. It might still end up being called that. There's a few other possibilities. And it's all about really the capacity to live in an undefended way, to live with an open, connected heart to God, to my life, to the world, to the people around me, to live with love, but also to live with, and I know where my boundaries lie, and not get confused or dysregulated around that. And so really I'm very passionate about this. This is my
thing.
Because I went through a whole journey of figuring it out, and through doing my own inner work around it, and teaching.
Does everyone has to go through such a painful topic, or could other people get it easier? And then,
Sure.
Other people's work make it easier for them?
Absolutely. I truly believe that. I truly believe that we don't all have to go through the same things. I believe that, I think there's a Hasidic story, and I don't know the exact details, so I can't tell you, but there's one about, there was a Hasidic master or someone who had spent 10 years trying to understand this one question in Gemara, and then he finally found the answer, and he went to shul to share it with someone, and he heard 2 people discussing the same question, and then one of them just gave the answer straight away, and he was like, wow, they just knew the answer, and it took me 10 years to figure it out. And he was very upset about it, and he went to whoever he went to discuss it with, and he told him, he said, by you bringing the energy of it down into the world, now it's accessible to all people. So I do believe that anytime one human being does the work of drawing down some kind of awareness into the world, it's accessible in the field, in the energy field of the world, and people can tap into it much easier. I don't believe, every time one human being does any form of inner work where they're able to overcome something energetically that's big, it now becomes easier for everybody else to do that. I think that we work on a collective, when it comes to this.
The author actually mentions that when you don't succumb to temptation, you're actually weakening the klipa in the entire world. It's amazing. It's
exactly.
It really has a ripple effect.
Yeah, and when we recognize that, it's just so beautiful, because then we realize there's so much more purpose to what we're doing. It's not just our own little struggle. It's impacting things on such a powerful...
Right. Even if no one ever knows, it just has that ripple effect. Can you walk us through, I know you gave the example before of the water, but can you walk us through, another, typical parenting situation and what that would look like to really, what it would look like dysregulated, what it would look like regulated? What does it look like to really have this God, Hashem-centered parenting?
You give me an example and I'll walk you through it.
Ooh. Okay. Trying to think. What's a good example? I wish our listeners were live. I don't know. The kids are fighting over something, or they're teasing one another. There's like a World War III going on, and you're there. Okay, you want to just say, "Everyone, be quiet and get along." How can you navigate that?
Yeah. So this is something that is what I'm going to explain. Some people may think is unattainable, and I would say that stay open. Instead of judging it as like, oh, I could never do that, acknowledge that there are little steps that can be broken down on the journey towards that, and that like we said, it's about like showing our children how we grow, rather than getting control in order now. I always struggled with this fighting scenario, so it's great that you brought it up. I used to kill me when my children fight, like a hot dagger in my heart. And one time, I think my oldest child was about maybe 6, and her younger sibling, her brother, was 5. They were 16 months apart. They were fighting, and she was hitting him with a hanger. And I was so dysregulated, I just grabbed the hanger away and I started yelling at them. And she looked at me and she said, "You stopped a fight between me and him, then you started a fight between me and you." With this and I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. Like I got in the middle here, and I actually just created more dysregulation, right? And of course, I didn't know how to do anything differently, and I was, it took me a while to figure out that sometimes I would say to my children when they're fighting, like, "Are you guys okay? Do you want help? Or are you just sorting it out between you?" This is what I learned is very helpful, because sometimes I assume, like, they're actually play fighting, and they're learning how to sort out their differences between each other. And actually, it's okay to leave it, but my own parent, fear is jumping in, because I'm thinking, 20 years down the line of, are they going to be doing this when they're adults? And all of the stories I'm telling myself about that, right? So there's a few options I can say, do you guys want help? Are you okay? Sometimes the kids will say, yeah, we're okay. And sometimes they'll say, no, we want help. Or one kid will say, I want help. Then I'll say, okay, I'm happy to talk to you about it. If you want to come downstairs in the kitchen with me, or we can go away from this. If it's one kid, right? If it's both kids, I'll say, okay, I want to hear what you have to say, what's going on for you, and I want to hear what you have to say. Your perspective and your perspective, and neither of you are right or wrong. I'm sure both of you are right and both of you are wrong, and both of you have a perspective that's valid. But can we just hear what's going on from your perspective and your perspective? And to spend a lot of time just listening, and then when it's very hard for the child to not interrupt, say, no, it didn't happen like that, it happened like that. So it's a lot of training. This is learning, actually teaching your children communication skills. This is the most useful skill your child will ever have in their entire life, for their marriage and for their own life in general. Teaching them how to listen to another person, and teaching them that other people have different perspectives than you, and it doesn't mean that they're right and you're wrong, because you're just seeing it from another perspective. So even if they don't get it for the first 15 years, they eventually will. And I do this with my kids all the time, and I say, okay, fine. And they get it now. They're happy to be quiet and wait for the other person, because they know they'll have an opportunity to speak as well. So I'll start off, okay, one at a time. You start, and then they'll tell me the whole perspective, and I'll reflect it back, and I'll say, is this what happened? And when they say, yeah, that's what happened, I'll say, okay, great. Then I go to the next person, and I'll hear what they have to say, and this is what happened. Okay, great. Once they both feel heard, the energy, the dysregulation is very much more regulated, and I'll ask them, so what do you think would be a good way forward? Let's say they're fighting over a toy. I say, do you guys want to have turns? Do you want to have, what do you think we should do? And often they come up with a solution on their own, quite easily, okay, we'll take turns, 10 minutes each, or whatever it is, or we'll see if we can, maybe we need to buy 2 of these things for next time, but for now, let's do this, or whatever it might be. Or actually, we'll realize that one kid actually took something from another kid without permission, so actually they need to return it, but once we've heard it, then we can actually resolve it. So you're teaching conflict resolution, you're teaching how to communicate, you're teaching how to regulate in the face of dysregulation, you're teaching so many things to your child by just navigating this being the mediator in this kind of communication. And it might take a long time. It might be you have to stop what you're doing for half an hour and listen to each kid until you resolve it. But what have you just taught your child? That's amazing, right? That's skills for life. And what's so amazing when I hear my children use this language of, this is just my perspective, when they start fighting, no, it didn't happen like that, and they can say, well, this is my perspective. It's that is great. That's going to serve that child well. That's amazing. And so instead of seeing my children now as fighting as being a problem, I see it as an opportunity to teach them how to communicate about differences. And that is a game changer for me, because it used to terrify me when I saw them fighting. And now I say, yes, what a great opportunity for me to educate my children about how to communicate. And it really calms my nervous system rather than riles it up. It's like, it really helps. That's a perspective shift on my part. It's a perspective shift on my part, which is, there was a perspective or a judgment of, this is terrible that they're fighting. And I asked myself, that's an interesting perspective. What other options might there be? What perspective on their fighting can actually create more lightness here? And actually, this perspective of, this is an opportunity for them to practice conflict resolution when they're young and they're in the safety of a home, rather than being in their marriage or being in a job where they're about to be fired or about to get divorced. Like, this is amazing. I have such a great container for this. This is great. I love it when you guys fight. You get to do some good learning, some good role playing, whatever it is. Like, that for me is like shifting my whole perspective on their fighting, right? And so instead of it being a problem, I see it as an opportunity. And that's.
I have one final question for you. You know, you mentioned, let's say when you were younger, that you were bullied or whatever. You know, how can we help our children when they go through something that they, you know, how do we minimize their quote unquote trauma? Like, if the fact is, things happen to our kids, and even if we are the most loving, you know, regulated parents, things happen. How do we help our children that they can overcome their challenges, they can stay in touch with their nefesh halikis, that they don't get so, you know, overtaken by the nefesh Bahamas in these cases, or disconnected?
So first of all, we have to acknowledge that children will get dysregulated, and they also, the capacity to fully regulate only really we come into it as we mature, right? As in, our prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until we're 25 to 30 years old. And even according to Torah, the concept of das not being fully developed until a person is 20 or even older was built into halacha, in the sense that a person was not tried in a beis din until the age of 20, even though after the age of bar and bas mitzvah, they're officially responsible for keeping all of the Torah and mitzvahs. But if they were, let's say, mechal Shabbos, they were not taken to a beis din, and there was no capital punishment if they did not do anything until the age of 20. And the reason given is because the person does not have das till the age of 20. And I believe that nowadays that's even like, I think that's like older now. I don't know, nowadays people having das at the age of 20, that they're going to be very, very emotionally healthy, in the sense that, like, they must have, you know, had a good head start. But, you know, in those days, kids would, at the age of like 3, could memorize like the whole of like the chumash or whatever. I mean, they had like different brains. I don't know, but like the reality is
exactly.
Exactly. So like the idea that there is space in Torah to understand that children by definition are dysregulated, in the sense that they are, that then their prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped, and they are basically just, we talk in Tanya about emotions being inner children, right? And the chabad being the parent. And their chabad is not fully developed, so they are literally embodiments of their inner children, embodiments of their emotional energy. And it's up to us as parents to be the parent, to be the external brain, to be the external regulator, to co-regulate with them. And that is going to help their brain develop, so that they can then learn to self-regulate. And this is a process. It's going to take their whole childhood to get better and better at. And
especially since the neshama comes second, right? Nefesh hashenis, like it doesn't
exactly.
Comes, the nefesh Bahamas is there first, so they're first exposed to the negativity or the survival, and the nefesh likis has to play catch up almost in that sense.
Right, exactly. And so we play the role as parents of the external chabad on behalf of our children, and to nurture and hold space for and have compassion for our children, and then to guide and educate. Like the role of me doing inner work with my inner child, to first acknowledge that there's a part of me that's terrified right now, and I may need to move my body and breathe and process that terror, and then I need to ask myself, what am I afraid of? And is it, and that's an interesting perspective, and is that a judgment that I'm making, and is it true, and where does it come from, and what is my Torah-based value, and what do I truly believe, and who am I really, and what am I doing here? And I have to then, bring that into, imagine as if I really felt, if I really believed, what would I feel? What would I feel right now? If I really believed that God was holding me, what would I feel right now? If I really believed and trusted, in the words of Shilamana Sasai Horim, if I really believed that God was watching me and protecting me and guarding me and my children and all of us, and God was shining His light upon us and giving us peace, the words of Yivarechacha. Like if I really believed the words I say every day, if I really believe the brachas I say in the morning, that God is directing the steps of man and God gives me everything that I need, how would I live? How would I live? How would I feel? Like, what would happen in my body? Like, that's where my das comes in, where I can actually, what would I feel if I really believed this stuff? And that's the point of that integration.
Wow. Unbelievable. Wow. I learned so much from this conversation. Thank you so much, Devori, for sharing your hard-earned wisdom and experience with us. And, wishing all of us hatzlacha with this inner work, with this avaida, with, bringing in touch with our Chabad and our Neshama and Hashem. And thank you everyone for listening. Please subscribe to the Optimizing Mother podcast, share this with your friends, and let us know if something that you heard or learned tonight has made a difference to you as a mother. Thank you.
Thank you.